the inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
You sure gotta climb a lot of steps to get to this Capitol building here in Washington. Well, I wonder who that sad little scrap of paper is.
I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee. But I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. The Schoolhouse Rock version of How a Bill Becomes a Law is ingrained in the minds of millions of Americans. It lays out, as only a cartoon with a memorable lyric can, the ideal of how a proposed bill works its way through Congress and across the president's desk. It doesn't ignore the challenges, but it still seems pretty straightforward. In reality, that's not always the case. I'm joined this morning by Chip Gerhardt, who, as we record this interview, and the 113th Congress is within hours of adjournment, is still working to transform a bill he cares about into a law. Chip is the president and founder of Government Strategies, LLC. He has been locally based lobbyist for years with experience working on local, state, and federal levels. He is the former vice chair of the Hamilton County Republican Party and a member of the Board of Elections. In other words, Chip is not a neophyte when it comes to how government works. But he has learned some new lessons over the last 8 years. Chip, welcome to Newsmakers.
Thanks, Dan.
Let's get started with, I want to clarify, we are taping on Friday morning. You're literally watching your texts come back and forth about where this stands, and we'll clarify what all that means as we go along here. But let's talk about the bill. It's called the ABLE bill. What is this?
Well, the ABLE Act will expand the 529 college savings account program to allow people with disabilities or their families to save for them, establish a savings account for certain expenditures, and not jeopardize their eligibility for Medicaid or Social Security.
So currently, a child or an adult who has a disability, significant disability, and is taking SSI, is taking Medicaid, what are the limits that what can a family do to help?
Well, the federal law currently prohibits people who qualify for Social Security or Medicaid from having more than $2,000 worth of assets in their name or earning more than about $680 a month. So what it means for that individual with a disability or their family, like ours, that you can't establish any financial independence from a savings account standpoint, nor can the individual really find a job or keep a job that pays a livable wage or risk that eligibility.
Even if they're capable of it.
Even if they're capable, and more people with disabilities are capable. They've always been capable, but society is catching up now with those individuals.
This is not just a theoretical issue for you. You mentioned our family, your family. How does this personally relate to you, and how did you get involved in this?
Well, I have a daughter. I have 3 children and 2 sons and a daughter. My daughter Ann is 17 and she has Down syndrome, and so she qualifies. She fits into this category, and this was an issue that my wife and I were not aware of, and thousands of families are not aware of it. But we learned years ago that federal law is what it is. I am a board member of the National Down Syndrome Society and have been for 7 years. And upon joining NDSS's board, we have a public policy component, and this issue came up as an issue that was confronting our families and the families of many with family members with disabilities. And so we started looking into the inequities in current law and what we might be able to do about it, and that's how I got involved 7 years ago with this issue.
Now, I gave that whole setup about your background.
Right.
Did you think this was going to take 7 years?
No. I'm glad they didn't tell me it was going to take 7 years, because I might not have been so committed at the time. We're in our 4th Congress now, in our 8th year. This issue actually predated my involvement on the board, but it started at the kitchen table of a family in Northern Virginia, a family with a daughter not unlike Ann, Natalie Beck, who has Down syndrome, and her family and others like them realized that there was this situation. They went to meet with a member of Congress, Chris Van Hollen from Maryland, and presented the issue, and it was a surprise to him and many others that this issue existed, and we began in the 110th and made some progress and failed in the 110th. We went into the 111th and made some progress and failed in the 111th, and in the 112th Congress 4 years ago is when we made a change to look at changing the 529 account. And that's an account that most people understand. Members of Congress understand it, and people like us.
Right. For your children, for your grandchildren, for college education.
Right.
You can save, and it grows, and it's tax-free, and all those things.
So from a philosophical standpoint, it made sense. You know, the story I can tell is I have 3 children. My 2 sons have 529 accounts. My daughter does not, and the only reason she doesn't have a 529 account is because she has an extra 21st chromosome. How is that fair? It's hard to argue that point, argue back against that point. And so we were able to make significant headway in the 112th Congress, culminating in Speaker Boehner's commitment, understanding of the bill and the commitment to its importance and seeing it through. And I think that's why we've had the success we've had this time.
Okay, multiple Congresses. It took you a while to hit on the mechanism, the 529 account. That's not where you started out.
It's not where we started.
Okay. When you get in to talk to a member of Congress, either from the House or the Senate, how much pushback do you get on something like this, and how much support do you normally get?
Well, the initial conversations were around reforming the tax code or reforming Medicaid. Lots of pushback there. Those are big, Byzantine, complicated, and when you make changes to those, there are impacts that people can't foresee. So the policymakers are concerned about tweaking that. When we got to the 529 account and talked about expanding that, that's really when we picked up speed and started to get significant momentum and support, and the arguments that we could make really satisfied the philosophical beliefs of almost any member of Congress, because I could go in and talk to the most liberal member who might believe that the government should spend more and more money on people like Ann, and I could say this is a way for government to help protect my daughter and many like her. Now,
but not by spending money.
Not by spending money, right? No, but by establishing an opportunity and correcting an inequity in the law. But then I could go to the most conservative member and say, "You're not going to spend any money on this. This is going to allow me and my wife Jane to save money, our money for our daughter, so that you don't have to, and your constituents don't have to, because unless we make these changes, you're going to relegate Ann and many people like her to rely on these public benefits."
So if Ann has a savings account that you and your wife can feel good that there's a buffer there, there's cushion there, and Ann can work, right?
Yes.
So she can do a lot, and if she works, she's a tax-paying citizen.
She's right. She's productive. She's tax-paying. She can buy things. I mean, not only pay income tax, but with more money, you buy more things. So the economic impact of this is significant, and I think that's why we were able to attract support from the most liberal member to the most conservative member.
Okay, so it's not 8 years of the same argument, because you switched the mechanism.
Right.
It took you a while to find the right mechanism.
Correct.
But it's now been 4 years,
right,
and we're in the last hours of the 113th.
Literally.
Literally.
Right.
So what's the problem? Well, it sounds to me, in fact, when the House finally got this on the floor about a week ago, it finally passed 404 to 17.
Right.
So, talk about overwhelming.
Right.
You know, bipartisan, all those words we like to use. So what's taking so long?
Well, it's everything else that's going on in the federal government. It's the omnibus bill, it's the tax extenders, it's the continuing resolution, it's the activity that Congress needs to do to, in my words, keep the lights on. And I think governmental bodies tend to default to those activities first, and then they get around to doing the rest of the work.
And in this Congress, it's been hard to get around to the rest of the work.
Right, yeah. I mean, many have commented on the how much success this Congress has had. From my perspective, they've been very accommodating and very helpful on this bill, and I think that this is an example of how constituencies and special interest groups and members of Congress can come together to solve a significant issue for millions of people.
So when you go to Washington over the past 7 years or whatever it's been, what do? You're just going into different elected officials' offices? Are you meeting with staff people? How does this really work?
Well, it's both. It's a lot of staff work. I mean, what I think most people don't recognize is that most of the work that gets done is done by the staff members of the elected officials. It has to be. There are so many issues that these elected officials have to deal with. So we have had thousands of meetings with staff members, and I have had hundreds of meetings with staff members over these last 7 years. But ultimately, it's the elected official that has to make the decision. He or she needs to put his or her name on the bill as a co-sponsor or press the yes button when the vote comes up. And so we have actively reached out to members over these last 7 years.
Now, this is a grassroots thing. This
Yes.
is people who have children who have needs, for the most part, that are driving this.
Right.
This is not a corporation who's hiring you as a lobbyist. Where does the money come from for you and other parents to go to Washington and do the work you've got to do, the thousands of meetings, the hundreds of meetings, whatever it is? Where does that come from?
Well, it's our money. Mostly, it's I'm a volunteer board member of the NDSS, but I made a commitment to that, so I'm all in with our issues. But the moms and dads that come to Washington on an annual basis, we have a day on the Hill every year called the Buddy Walk on Washington, and we have hundreds of families that come to Washington, and they typically pay their expenses on their own. I mean, it's so personal for us that it's worth it.
So right now, it's passed the House.
Right.
It's back over in the Senate, and the Senate is now dealing with the omnibus bill and a lot of other things as of Friday morning here.
Right.
What's going to happen? What's the good thing from your perspective? What's the danger at this moment?
Well, the good thing is that we have strong bipartisan bicameral support. Both Leader Reid and Minority Leader McConnell are co-sponsors on the ABLE Act and have committed to us that this thing will get to the floor.
Okay.
Senator Portman and Senator Brown are both co-sponsors, and they've committed that this will get to the floor. So we're confident that it will get to the floor today or tomorrow or tonight or sometime, but it hasn't yet. And because it hasn't yet, you never know what might happen.
And let's just say it doesn't, and this Congress adjourns 48 hours from now. Can they just pick it up in January?
Right, no. At the end of this session, every bill that hasn't been acted upon dies.
And starts all over?
And we've done that 4 times. And, you know, I'm not a doomsday type of person, but we have had so much excitement and commitment, these hundreds of people paying thousands of dollars to travel thousands of miles to meet with members and staff members. I'm not sure that we can get that level of excitement going again if it were to fail to be acted upon this time.
Well, let's end with a final thought from Schoolhouse Rock here. Okay.
It's not easy to become a law, is it?
No, but how I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
He signed your bill. Now you're a law.
Oh, yes.
Well, Chip, I'm hoping that very soon, and by the time this show airs, hopefully we're able to run a crawl over the bottom that says this bill has become a law, and I hope everything goes correctly. But you're headed back to Washington sometime very quickly here, right?
I'm going to go back to be there for the Senate vote, and hopefully me and my family will be going back next week or in the very near future to see the president sign this bill.
That would be great.
That would be wonderful.
And I bet your daughter is be really proud of that.
Yeah, she's very excited.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Stay tuned after the break. A Cincinnati connection to one of a song that the Library of Congress has called the most powerful American song in the 20th century. And its roots right here in Cincinnati.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall
Welcome back. For members of my generation, baby boomers, especially those of us drawn into the streets by the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement in the 1960s and 70s, no song was more important than We Shall Overcome. I never thought about where it came from, much less that it had a local connection, until a couple of months ago. I am joined this morning by Isaias Gamboa, the author of We Shall Overcome, Sacred Song on the Devil's Tongue. Mr. Gamboa is a singer, arranger, a songwriter, and the founder of the We Shall Overcome Foundation. And Eric Abercrumbie is the Director of Ethnic Programs and Services at the African American Culture and Research Center at the University of Cincinnati. He is also a professor in the Department of African American Studies. Welcome to Newsmakers.
Thanks for having me.
As I just said, I had no idea. Stumbled across all of this a couple of months ago because I happened to be on campus the right day, and I was with somebody who said, "Oh, I bet you'd be interested in this ceremony that's going on." And I came over, and when the sheet music was being donated to the university, and just blown away by this. So this book. Let's start, Isaias. This book is not just about this song.
No, sir.
It is about the music of America, of the African tradition in America. Were you working on this book for a long time and then just sort of stumbled into this story as part of it?
Not particularly. I have a music industry past. I was a record producer for many years, and someone from my past approached me and told me that their grandmother from Cincinnati had written We Shall Overcome and never received credit. This is 20 years ago, and I quite frankly didn't believe him. Well, about 5 or so years ago, he approached me again and brought up the subject again, and I said there was a ring of truth to this. So I did a little bit of research. I figured it might be easier to prove that he was wrong, save me some time. So little by little, I realized that it wasn't the case, that he was actually true. And he went to the storage and got his grandmother's artifacts and pulled out a picture of her with Dr. King. And I said, whoa. He says, yeah, they were good friends. I said, well, there's something here. And that sort of drew me into this narrative.
We'll take a look at some of those pictures in a bit here. Eric,
yes.
You've been around here a long time. Did you know this connection?
No, I didn't. You know, as many times as I have sung the song, I was actually blown away and fascinated when I met Dr. Gamboa. They were coming to do a tribute. And even as much as I've been aware of, you know, black movement, black history, this was something I did not know, but was elated to learn.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing. And by the way, I want to make clear that now a lot of these materials from the family are at the archives, and they're accessible online, right?
Yes, and people could just go, the easiest way is to go to our university website and put in Louise Shropshire.
Okay.
And that would take
you to the right place.
University of Cincinnati, yeah.
Yeah. Now, Louise Shropshire, who was she? And we can get a picture of her in her 20s here that you provided me.
Yes.
Color image that's kind of nice. Who was she?
Well, Louise Shropshire was actually the granddaughter of slaves, and her family were sharecroppers. They moved up to Cincinnati in the early 1900s for opportunities, basically. She ended up marrying a man named Robert Shropshire, who actually founded Shropshire Bail Bonds, who's still in effect today.
Right.
She grew into, I guess, influence in the city through her husband and also eventually through the church, African American church. She became a close friend of Dr. King and Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth as well. And she just grew into this sort of iconic figure in African American Cincinnati culture. And she became much more than that. Obviously, in her composition, If My Jesus Wills was very popular, and it became actually the foundation of what we know as We Shall Overcome today.
And one of the things that is really important to see, I hope we can get this up, we're having a little bit of trouble, but is the sheet music. Because it wasn't We Shall Overcome to begin with.
Right.
What was the name of the song?
It was entitled If My Jesus Wills, and her lyrics were, I'll overcome, I'll overcome, I'll overcome someday. If my Jesus wills, I do believe I'll overcome someday. And it's important to note that from the time that the Africans were freed from slavery, they were calling to God for freedom. They were calling to God for justice. And the movement, the African American Civil Rights Movement, was based on a foundation of prayer. It was based on a foundation of belief that there was a God that did not believe that this was just. And so her song was kind of evoking God in this movement.
There's the lyrics. I've sort of clarified them so people can see them as well.
That's right.
So the original lyrics, it's in the first person, singular,
Yes.
I.
Yes.
How's it get changed?
Well, from what Dr. Gamboa has researched and found, actually every time Dr. King would come to Cincinnati, he would stay with the Shropshires.
Right.
And not only did she encourage Dr. King to come, research will show that Reverend Shuttlesworth came to Cincinnati because of her. She helped to bring him
She
here.
was the link.
She was the link to help bring him to Revelations Baptist Church. But as you stand around a piano and kind of talk, Dr. King, we think what Dr. King said, Louise, how would you, could I change this up a little bit? Because he would go to places like the Highlander Center and different places that civil rights activists would go. And part of what would happen would be singing.
So do you think, because the way that it sort of gets out into the general public as We Shall Overcome, and you talk about this, is Pete Seeger.
Correct.
Sort of appropriates it. I don't want to get into all the details. Appropriates it, then copyrights it himself, along with 4 other people.
Right.
But do you think it was Dr. King going to the Highlander Center and he heard it there and that's how he picks it up? Or, did he do it first and then Dr. King heard it? I couldn't quite figure that one out.
I think that the two things, Dr. King asked to be able to use it in his rhetoric, and that's different from actually how the song was transformed musically. I believe that sometime in the 50s, the song from I was changed to We, obviously to be able to be more singable with the group of people. And Pete Seeger and other sort of folkies, as they were called, they were in the business of singing music, and spreading the word, whatever that word happened to be at the time. And I believe at the time, If My Jesus Wills was picked up, they didn't really know what it would have become. In retrospect, we realized it's an iconic song. But in the 50s, who would know, right? So it was changed, I believe, to We Shall Overcome for the purpose of being sung in the masses.
Well, and that's the whole point about being a historian. Eric and I have that, we share that. It's being able to see things through the eyes of people who lived in the past, not through our own eyes looking backwards, because it's, can you stand for a moment that, yeah, they didn't know what they were doing, and they didn't know what the next step was going to be.
But even though he copyrighted the song, he never admitted to writing the song.
Right.
And that's why we're glad at the University of Cincinnati. We feel so fortunate that family, through Dr. Gamboa, selected us to be the repository of helping to champion the story. We feel really good. The city of Cincinnati has said, we believe you. The state of Ohio, where Louise Shropshire just went into the Ohio Civil Rights Hall of Fame, said, we believe you. And a lot of black music especially has been challenged by this whole idea of black history being lost, stolen, or strayed. And so many people really did not understand the copyright process really...
That's a very formal process.
Yes.
I'm about out of time, and I want people to know that we've just whetted your appetite on this. Here's the book, We Shall Overcome, Sacred Song on the Devil's Tongue, which I love the I love the subtitle. I love it. So thank you very much for your work. Thank you for your preservation of this. People should go to the website, go to Amazon, get the book. Have a good week. Join us again next Sunday. Meet the men and the women shaping our community for the future.
Thank you.